Chapter 26. On the Feng Yao Bridge, as Xiao Hung makes known sentimental matters in equivocal language. In the Xiao Hsiao Lodge, Chia Yün gives, while under the effects of the spring lassitude, expression to her secret feelings. After 30 days careful nursing, Cao Yün, we will now notice, not only got strong and hale in body, but the scars even on his face completely healed up, so he was able to shift his quarters again into the garden of Broad Vista. But we will banish this topic as it does not deserve any additional explanations. Let us now turn our attention elsewhere. During the time that Cao Yün was of late laid up in bed, Chia Yün, along with the young pages of the household, sat up on watch to keep an eye over him, and both day and night they tarried on this side of the mansion. But Chia Hung, as well as all the other waiting maids, remained in the same part to nurse Cao Yün, so Chia Yün, and she saw a good deal of each other on several occasions, and gradually an intimacy sprung up between them. Xiao Hung observed that Chia Yün held in his hand a handkerchief very much like the one she herself had dropped some time ago, and was bent upon asking him for it, but she did, on the other hand, not think she could do so with propriety. The unexpected visit of the bonze and Taoist priest rendered, however, superfluous the services of the various male attendants, and Chia Yün had therefore to go again and oversee the men planting the trees. Now she had a mind to drop the whole question, that she could not reconcile herself to it, and now she longed to go and ask him about it, but fears rose in her mind, lest people should entertain any suspicions as to the relations that existed between them. But just as she faltered, quite irresolute, and her heart was thoroughly unsettled, she unawares heard someone outside inquire, "Sister, are you in the room or not?" Xiao Hung, upon catching this question, looked out through a hole in the window, and perceiving at a glance that it was no one else than a young servant girl attached to the same court as herself, Chia Hui by name, she consequently said by way of reply, "Yes, I am. Come in." When these words reached her ear, Chia Hui ran in, and taking at once a seat on the bed, she observed with a smile, "How lucky I've been. I was a little time back in the court washing a few things, when Cao Yün cried out that some tea should be sent over to Miss Lin, and Sister Hua handed it to me to go on the errand. By a strange coincidence, our old lady had presented some money to Miss Lin, and she was engaged at the moment in distributing it among their servant girls. As soon, therefore, as she saw me get there, Miss Lin forthwith grasped 2 handfuls of cash and gave them to me. How many there are I don't know, but do keep them for me." Speedily then opening her handkerchief, she emptied the cash. Xiao Hung counted them for her by 5s and 10s at a time. She was beginning to put them away, when Chia Hui remarked, "How are you after all, feeling of late in your mind? I'll tell you what, you should really go and stay at home for a couple of days, and were you to ask a doctor round and to have a few doses of medicine, you'll get all right at once." "What are you talking about?" Xiao Hung replied. "What shall I go home for, when there's neither rhyme nor reason for it? Ms. Lin, I remember, is naturally of a weak physique and has constantly to take medicines," Chia Hui added. "So were you to ask her for some and bring them over and take them, it would come to the same thing." "Nonsense," rejoined Xiao Hung. "Are medicines also to be recklessly taken? You can't so on forever like this," continued Chia Hui. "You besides loath to eat and loath to drink, and what will you be like in the long run? What's there to fear?" observed Xiao Hung. "Won't it anyhow be better to die a little earlier? It would be a riddance. Why do you deliberately come out with all this talk?" Chia Hui demurred. "How could you ever know anything of the secrets of my heart?" Xiao Hung inquired. Chia Hui nodded her head and gave way to reflection. "I don't think it's strange on your part," she said after a time, "for it is really difficult to abide in this place. Yesterday, for instance, our dowager lady remarked that the servants and attendants had, during all the days that Cao Yün was ill, a good deal to put up with, and that now that he has recovered, incense should be burnt everywhere, and the vows fulfilled, and she expressed a wish that those in his service should, one and all, be rewarded according to their grade. I and several others can be safely looked upon as young in years, and unworthy to presume so high, so I don't feel in any way aggrieved. But how is it that one like you couldn't be included in the number? My heart is much annoyed at it. Had there been any fear that his Eugene would have got 10 times more, I could not even then have felt sore against her, for she really deserves it. I'll just tell you an honest truth. Who else is there like her? Not to speak of the diligence and carefulness she has displayed all along. Even had she not been so diligent and careful, she couldn't have been set aside. But what is provoking is that that lot, like Yün and Hsiao, should have been included in the upper class. Yet it's because everyone places such reliance on the fine reputation of their father and mother that they exalt them. Now, do tell me, is this sufficient to anger one or not? It won't do to be angry with them, Chia Yün observed. The proverb says, "You may erect a shed 1,000 li long, but there is no entertainment from which the guests will not disperse." And who is it that will tarry here for a whole lifetime? In another 3 years or 5 years, every single one of us will have gone her own way. And who will, when that time comes, worry her mind about anyone else? These allusions had the unexpected effect of touching Chia Yün to the heart. And in spite of herself, the very balls of her eyes got red, but so uneasy did she feel it crying for no reason that she had to exert herself to force a smile. "What you say is true," she ventured. "And yet, you even yesterday explained how the rooms should be arranged by and by, and how the clothes should be made, just as if he was bound to hang on to dear life for several hundreds of years." Chia Yün at these words gave a couple of sardonic smiles, but when about to pass some remark, she perceived a youthful servant girl who had not as yet let her hair grow walk in, holding in her hands several patterns and 2 sheets of paper. "You are asked," she said, "to trace these 2 designs." As she spoke, she threw them at Chia Yün, and twisting herself round, she immediately scampered away. "Whose are they, after all?" Chia Yün inquired, addressing herself outside. "Couldn't you wait even so much as to conclude what you had to say, that flew off at once? Who is steaming bread and waiting for you? Or are you afraid, forsooth, lest it should get cold?" "They belong to Sister Chi," the young servant girl merely returned for answer from outside the window. And, raising her feet high, she ran tramp, tromp on her way back again. Xiao Hung lost control over her temper, and snatching the designs, she flung them on one side. She then rummaged in a drawer for a pencil, but finding, after a prolonged search, that they were all blunt. "Where did I," she thereupon ejaculated, "put that brand new pencil the other day? How is it I can't remember where it is?" While she soliloquized, she became wrapped in thought. After some reflection, she at length gave a smile. "Of course," she exclaimed, "the other evening Ying took it away." And turning towards Chia Yün, "Fetch it for me," she shouted. "Sister Hua," Chia Yün rejoined, "is waiting for me to get a box for her, so you had better go for it yourself." "What?" remarked Xiao Hung. "She's waiting for you? And are you still squatting here, chatting leisurely? Hadn't it been that I asked you to go and fetch it, she too wouldn't have been waiting for you, you most perverse vixen." With these words on her lips, she herself walked out of the room, and leaving the I Hung court, she straightway proceeded in the direction of Pao Jui's court. As soon, however, as she reached the Feng pavilion, Tio View, nurse, appeared in view from the opposite side. Staring view from the opposite side. Xiao Hung halted and putting on a smile. "Nurse Li?" she asked. "Where are you, old dame, bound for? How is it you're coming this way?" Nurse Li stopped short and clapped her hands. "Tell me," she said, "has he deliberately again gone and fallen in love with that Mr. something or other like Ying, Cloud, or you, Ring? They now insist upon my bringing him inside, but if they get wind of it by and by in the upper rooms, it won't again be a nice thing." "Are you, old lady?" replied his Yao Hung, smiling, "taking things in such real earnest that you readily believe them and want to go and ask him in here?" "What can I do?" rejoined Nurse Li. "Why, that fellow," added T.I.O. Hung laughingly. "Well, if he has any idea of decency, do the right thing and not come. Besides, he's not a fool," pleaded Nurse Li. "So why shouldn't he come in?" "Well, if he is to come," answered his Yao Hung, "it will devolve upon you, worthy dame, to lead him along with you. Were you by and by to let him penetrate inside all alone and knock recklessly about why it won't do at all? Have I got all that leisure? Retorted Nurse Lay to trudge along. With him? I'll simply tell him to come, and later on I can dispatch a young servant, girl or some old woman to bring him in and have done. Saying this, she continued her way, leaning on her staff. After listening to her rejoinder, Xiao Hung stood still, and plunging in abstraction, she did not go and fetch the pencil. But presently she caught sight of a servant girl running that way. Espying Xiao Hung lingering in that spot, "Sister Hung," she cried, "what are you doing in here?" Xiao Hung raised her head and recognized a young waiting maid called Chui Ere. "Where are you off to?" Xiao Hung asked. "I've been told to bring in Master Secundus, Mr. Yün Chui," Ere replied, after which answer she there and then departed with all speed. Xiao Hung reached, meanwhile, the Feng Yao Bridge. As soon as she approached the gateway, she perceived Chi Er coming along with Chia Yün from the opposite direction, while advancing Chia Yün ogled Hsiao Hung. And Xiao Hung too, though pretending to be addressing herself to Chui Er, cast a glance at Chia Yün, and their four eyes, as luck would have it, met. Xiao Hung involuntarily blushed all over, and turning herself round, she walked off towards the Hengyu court. But we will leave her there, without further remarks. During this time, Chia Yün followed Chui Er by a circuitous way into the Aihung court. Chui Er entered first and made the necessary announcement. Then subsequently she ushered in Chia Yün. When Chia Yün scrutinized the surroundings, he perceived here and there in the court several blocks of rockery, among which were planted banana trees. On the opposite side were two storks preening their feathers under the fir trees. Under the covered passage were suspended, in a row, cages of every description, containing all sorts of fairy-like rare birds. In the upper part were 5 diminutive ante-rooms, uniformly carved with unique designs, and above the framework of the door was hung a tablet with the inscription in 4 huge characters: "I hung Kuai Lu, the happy red and joyful green." I thought it strange, Chia Yün argued mentally, that it should be called the I Hung Court. But are these in fact the 4 characters inscribed on the tablet? But while he was communing within himself, he heard someone laugh and then exclaim from the inner side of the gauze window, "Come in at once! How is it that I've forgotten you these 2 or 3 months?" As soon as Chia Yün recognized Cao Yu's voice, he entered the room with hurried step. On raising his head, his eye was attracted by the brilliant splendor emitted by gold and jade, and by the dazzling luster of the elegant arrangements. He failed, however, to detect where Cao Yu was ensconced. The moment he turned his head around, he espied, on the left side, a large cheval glass, behind which appeared to view, standing side by side, 2 servant girls of 15 or 16 years of age. "Master Secundus," they ventured, "please take a seat in the inner room." Chia Yün could not even muster courage to look at them straight in the face, but promptly assenting, he walked into a green gauze mosquito house, where he saw a small lacquered bed hung with curtains of a deep red color, with clusters of flowers embroidered in gold. Cao Yu, wearing a house dress and slipshod shoes, was reclining on the bed, a book in hand. The moment he perceived Chia Yün walk in, he discarded his book and forthwith smiled and raised himself up. Chia Yün hurriedly pressed forward and paid his salutation. Cao Yu then offered him a seat, but he simply chose a chair in the lower part of the apartment. "Ever since the moon in which I came across you," Cao Yu observed smilingly, "and told you to come into the library, I've had, who would have thought it, endless things to continuously attend to, so that I forgot all about you." "It's indeed, who lacked good fortune," rejoined Chia Yün with a laugh. "Particularly so, as it again happened that you, uncle, fell ill. But are you quite right once more?" "All right," answered Cao Yu. "I heard that you've been put to much trouble and inconvenience on a good number of days." "Had I even had any trouble to bear," added Chia Yün, "it would have been my duty to bear it." But your complete recovery, uncle, is really a blessing to our whole family. As he spoke, he discerned a couple of servant maids come to help him to a cup of tea. But while conversing with Pao Yu, Chia Yün was intent upon scrutinizing the girl with slim figure and oval face, and clad in a silvery red jacket, a blue satin waistcoat, and a white silk petticoat with narrow pleats. At the time of Pao Yu's illness, Chia Yün had spent a couple of days in the inner apartments, so that he remembered half of the inmates of note, and the moment he set eyes upon the servant girl, he knew that it was she, Jen, and that she was in Pao Yu's rooms on a different standing to the rest. Now therefore that she brought the tea in herself, and that Pao Yu was, besides, sitting by, he rose to his feet with alacrity and put on a smile. "Sister," he said, "how is it that you are pouring tea for me? I came here to pay uncle a visit. What's more, I'm no stranger, so let me pour it with my own hands." "Just you sit down and finish," Pao Yu interposed. "Will you also behave in this fashion with servant girls?" "In spite of what you say," remarked Chia Yün, smiling, "they are young ladies attached to your rooms, uncle, and how could I presume to be disorderly in my conduct?" So saying, he took a seat and drank his tea. Pao Yu then talked to him about trivial and irrelevant matters, and afterwards went on to tell him in whose household the actresses were best and whose gardens were pretty. He further mentioned to him in whose quarters the servant girls were handsome, whose banquets were sumptuous, as well as in whose home were to be found strange things, and what family possessed remarkable objects. Chia Yün was constrained to humor him in his conversation, but after a chat which lasted for some time, he noticed that Pao Yu was somewhat listless, and he promptly stood up and took his leave. And Pao Yu too did not use much pressure to detain him. "Tomorrow, if you have nothing to do, do come over," he merely observed, after which he again bade the young waiting maid Trier see him out. Having left the Ihung court, Chia Yün cast a glance all round, and realizing that there was no one about, he slackened his pace at once, and while proceeding leisurely, he conversed in a friendly way with Trier on one thing and another. First and foremost, he inquired of her what was her age and her name. "Of what standing are your father and mother?" He said, "How many years have you been in Uncle Pao's apartments?" "How much money do you get a month?" "In all, how many girls are there in Uncle Pao's rooms?" As Chia heard the questions set to her, she readily made suitable reply to each. "The one who was a while back talking to you," continued Chia Yün, "is called Hsiao Hung, isn't she?" "Yes, her name is Hsiao Hung," replied Trier, smiling. "But why do you ask about her?" "She inquired of you just now about some handkerchief or other," answered Chia Yün. "Well, I've picked one up." Trier greeted this response with a smile. "Many are the times," she said, "that she has asked me whether I had seen her handkerchief. But have I got all that leisure to worry my mind about such things?" She spoke to me about it again today, and she suggested that I should find it for her and that she would also recompense me. This she told me when we were just now at the entrance of the Hengyu court, and you too, Mr. Secundus, overheard her, so that I'm not lying. But dear Mr. Secundus, since you've picked it up, give it to me, do, and I'll see what she will give me as a reward. The truth is that Chia Yün had, the previous moon when he had come into the garden to attend to the planting of trees, picked up a handkerchief which he conjectured must have been dropped by some inmate of those grounds. But as he was not aware whose it was, he did not consequently presume to act with indiscretion. But on this occasion, he overheard Hsiao Hung make inquiries of Trier on the subject, and concluding that it must belong to her, he felt immeasurably delighted. Seeing, besides, how importunate Trier was, he at once devised a plan within himself, and vehemently producing from his sleeve a handkerchief of his own, he observed, as he turned towards Trier with a smile, "As for giving it to you, I'll do so. But in the event of your obtaining any present from her, you mustn't impose upon me." Trier assented to his proposal most profusely, and, taking the handkerchief, she sought Chia Yün out and then came back in search of Hsiao Hung. But we will leave her there for the present. We will now return to Pao Yu. After dismissing Chia Yün, he lay in such complete listlessness on the bed that he betrayed every sign of being half asleep. Shi Jin walked up to him and seated herself on the edge of the bed, and pushing him. "What are you about to go to sleep again?" she said. "Would it not do your languid spirits good if you went out for a bit of a stroll?" Upon hearing her voice, Pao, he grasped her hand in his. "I would like to go out," he smiled, "but I can't reconcile myself to the separation from you." "Get up at once," laughed Jin. And as she uttered these words, she pulled Po Yu up. "Where can I go?" exclaimed Pao. "You, I'm quite surfeited with everything." "Once out, you'll be all right," Hezi-Jen answered. "But if you simply give way to this languor, you'll be more than ever sick of everything at heart." Pao, who could not do otherwise, dull and out of sorts though he was, than accede to her importunities. Strolling leisurely out of the door of the room, he amused himself a little with the birds suspended under the veranda. Then he wended his steps outside the court and followed the course of the Hasenfang stream. But after admiring the golden fish for a time, he espied, on the opposite hillock, 2 young deer come rushing down as swift as an arrow. What they were up to Pao, he could not discern, but while abandoning himself to melancholy, he caught sight of Chia Lan, following behind with a small bow in his hand, and hurrying downhill in pursuit of them. As soon as he realized that Pao, you stood ahead of him, he speedily halted. "Uncle Succumbus," he smiled, "are you at home? I imagined you had gone out of doors. You are up to mischief again." "Hey, Pao," you rejoined. "They've done nothing to you, and why shoot at them with your arrows?" "I had no studies to attend to just now, so being free with nothing to do," Chia Lan replied laughingly, "I was practicing riding and archery." "Shut up," exclaimed Pao Yu. "When are you not engaged in practicing?" Saying this, he continued his way and straightway reached the entrance of the court. Here the bamboo foliage was thick and the breeze sighed gently. This was the Hsiao Hyang Lodge. Pao Yu listlessly rambled in. He saw a bamboo portiere hanging down to the ground. Stillness prevailed. Not a human voice fell on the ear. He advanced as far as the window, noticing that a whiff of subtle scent stole softly through the green gauze casement. Pao Yu applied his face closely against the frame to peep in, but suddenly he caught the faint sound of a deep sigh and the words, "Day after day, my feelings," slumbered drowsily. Upon overhearing this exclamation, Pao Yu unconsciously began to feel a prey to inward longings, but casting a second glance, he saw Chia Yün stretching herself on the bed. "Why is it," smiled Pao Yu from outside the window, "that your feelings day after day slumber drowsily?" So saying, he raised the portiere and stepped in. The consciousness that she had not been reticent about her feelings made Chia Yün unwittingly flush scarlet. Taking hold of her sleeve, she screened her face, and, turning her body round towards the inside, she pretended to be fast asleep. Pao Yu drew near her. He was about to pull her round when he saw Chia Yün's nurse enter the apartment, followed by 2 matrons. "Is Miss asleep?" they said. "If so, we'll ask her over when she wakes up." As these words were being spoken, Chia Yün eagerly twisted herself round and sat up. "Who's asleep?" she laughed. "We thought you were fast asleep, miss," smiled the 2 or 3 matrons as soon as they perceived Chia. "Here, the screening over. They call Zhuxuan. Your young mistress," they said, "has awoke. Come in and wait on her." While calling her, they quitted the room in a body. Chia Yün remained seated on the bed. Raising her arms, she adjusted her hair, and smilingly she observed to Pao Yu, "When people are asleep, what do you walk in for?" At the sight of her half-closed star-like eyes, and of her fragrant cheeks, suffused with a crimson blush, Pao Yu's feelings were of a sudden awakened. So, bending his body, he took a seat on a chair and asked with a smile, "What were you saying a short while back?" "I wasn't saying anything." "Damn," you replied. "What a lie you're trying to ram down my throat," laughed Pao. "You, I heard all," but in the middle of their colloquy, they saw Zhuxuan enter. So, Zhuxuan enter. He cried, "Pour me a cup of your good tea." "Where's the good tea to be had?" Zhuxuan answered. If you want good tea, you better wait till Xi Jian comes. Don't eat him, interposed Tea. You. Just go first and draw me some water. He's a visitor, remonstrated Su Xuan. And of course I should first pour him a cup of tea and then go and draw the water. With this answer, she started to serve the tea. My dear girl Pao, you exclaimed laughingly, if I could only share the same bridal curtain with your lovable young mistress, would I ever be able to treat you as a servant by making you fold the covers and make the beds. Why, Tay, you at once drooped your head. What are you saying? She remonstrated. What? Did I say anything? Smiled Pao. You, Tay, you burst into tears. You've recently, she observed, got into a new way. Whatever slang you happen to hear outside, you come and tell me. And whenever you read any improper book, you poke your fun at me. What? Have I become a laughingstock for gentlemen? As she began to cry, she jumped down from bed and promptly left the room. Oh, he was at a loss how to act. So agitated was he that he hastily ran up to her. My dear cousin, he pleaded, I do deserve death, but don't go and tell anyone. If, again, I venture to utter such kind of language, may blisters grow on my mouth and may my tongue waste away. But while appealing to her feelings, he saw his Zhen approach him. Go back at once, she cried, and put on your clothes as master wants to see you. At the very mention of his father, Pao, you felt suddenly as if struck by lightning. Regardless of everything and anything, he rushed as fast as possible back to his room, and changing his clothes, he came out into the garden. Here he discovered Pei Ming standing at the second gateway, waiting for him. Do you perchance know what he wants me for? How? You inquired. Master, hurry out at once, Pei Ming replied. You must, of course, go and see him. When you get there, you are sure to find out what it's all about. This said, he urged Pao, you on, and together they turned past the large pavilion. Pao Yu was, however, still laboring under suspicion, when he heard from the corner of the wall a loud outburst of laughter. Upon turning his head round, he caught sight of Hu Xueqin jump out, clapping his hands. Hadn't I said that my uncle wanted you? He laughed. Would you ever have rushed out with such alacrity? Pei Ming also laughed and fell on his knees. But Pao, he remained for a long time under the spell of utter astonishment, before he, at length, realized that it was Hu Supao who had inveigled him to come out. Hu Supao hastily made a salutation and a curtsy, and confessed his fault. He next gave way to entreaties, saying, Don't punish the young servant, for it is simply I who begged him go. Pao, you too had then no other alternative but to smile. I don't mind your playing your larks on me. But why, he inquired, did you mention my father? Were I to go and tell my aunt, your mother, to see to the rights and the wrongs of the case? How would you like it, my dear cousin? Remarked Hu Xueqin vehemently. The primary idea I had in view was to ask you to come out a moment sooner, and I forgot to respectfully shun the expression. But by and by, when you wish to chaff me, just you likewise allude to my father, and will thus be square. Yeah, exclaimed Pao Yu. You do more than ever deserve death. Then turning again towards Pei Ming, Yu Rufian, he said, What are you still kneeling for? Pei Ming began to bump his head on the ground with vehemence. Had it been for anything else, as Shu Yuqian chimed in, I wouldn't have made bold to disturb you, but it's simply in connection with my birthday, which is tomorrow, the 3rd day of the 5th moon. Chengji, Mei Sing, who was in that curio shop of ours, unexpectedly brought along, goodness knows where he fished them from, fresh lotus so thick and so long, so mealy and so crisp, melons of this size, and a Siamese porpoise, that long and that big smoked with cedar, such as is sent as tribute from the kingdom of Siam. Are not these 4 presents, pray, rare delicacies? The porpoise is not only expensive, but difficult to get, and that kind of lotus and melon must have cost him no end of trouble to grow. I lost no time in presenting some to my mother, and at once sent some to your old grandmother and my aunt, but a good many of them still remain now. And were I to eat them all alone, it would, I fear, be more than I deserve. So I concluded, after thinking right and left, that there was, besides myself, only you good enough to partake of some That is why I especially invite you to taste them. But, as luck would have it, a young singing boy has also come. So what do you say to you and I having a jolly day of it?" As they talked, they walked. And as they walked, they reached the interior of the library. Here they discovered a whole assemblage consisting of Tan Kuang, Cheng Ji Hai Sing, Chu, Chi, Jen, Qing, Jen, and others, and the singing boy as well. As soon as these saw Pao Yu walk in, some paid their respects to him. Others inquired how he was, and after the interchange of salutations, tea was drunk. Cao Xueqin then gave orders to serve the wine. Scarcely were the words out of his mouth than the servant lads bustled and fussed for a long while, laying the table. When at last the necessary arrangements had been completed, the company took their seats. Pao Yu verily found the melons and lotus of an exceptional description. "My birthday presents have not as yet been sent round," he felt impelled to say, a smile on his lips, "and here I come, ahead of them, to trespass on your hospitality." "Just so," retorted Cao Xueqin, "but when you come tomorrow to congratulate me, we'll consider what novel kind of present you can give me." "I've got nothing that I can give you," rejoined Pao Yu. "As far as money, clothes, eatables, and other such articles go, they are not really mine. All I can call my own are such pages of characters that I may write, or pictures that I may draw." "Your reference to pictures," added Xueqin, smiling, "reminds me of a book I saw yesterday, containing immodest drawings. They were truly beautifully done. On the front page, there figured also a whole lot of characters. But I didn't carefully look at them. I simply noticed the name of the person who had executed them. It was, in fact, something or other like King Kong. The pictures were actually exceedingly good." This allusion made Pao Yu exercise his mind with innumerable conjectures. "Of pictures drawn from past years to the present, I have," he said, "seen a good many, but I've never come across any King Huang." After considerable thought, he could not repress himself from bursting out laughing. Then, asking a servant to fetch him a pencil, he wrote a couple of words on the palm of his hand. This done, he went on to inquire of his Xueqin, "And did you see correctly that it read Kang Hong?" "How could I not have seen correctly?" ejaculated Cao Xueqin. Pao Yu thereupon unclenched his hand and allowed him to peruse what was written in it. "Were they possibly these two characters?" he remarked. "These are, in point of fact, not very dissimilar from what Ting Hong looked like." On scrutinizing them, the company noticed the two words, "Ong Yin," and they all laughed. "They must, we fancy, have been these two characters," they cried. "Your eyes, sir, nay, there's no saying, have suddenly grown dim." His Xueqin felt utterly abashed. Who could have said, he smiled, whether they were Tang Yin or Kuo Yin, candied silver or fruit silver? As he cracked this joke, however, a young page came and announced that Mr. Feng had arrived. Pao Yu concluded that the newcomer must be Feng Zhu Yuing, the son of Feng Tang, general with the prefix of Xingwu. "Ask him in at once," so Xueqin and his companions shouted with one voice. But barely were these words out of their mouths, then they realized that Feng Tuing had already stepped in, talking and laughing as he approached. The company speedily rose from table and offered him a seat. "That's right," smiled Feng Tuing. "You don't go out of doors, but remain at home and go in for high fun." Both Pao Yu and Cao Xueqin put on a smile. "We haven't," they remarked, "seen you for ever so long. Is your venerable father strong and hale?" "My father," rejoined Zhu Yang, "is, thanks to you, strong and hale. But my mother recently contracted a sudden chill and has been unwell for a couple of days." Xueqin discerned on his face a slight bluish wound. "With whom have you again been boxing?" he laughingly inquired. "That you've hung up this signboard since the occasion," laughed Feng Zhu Yang, "on which I wounded Lieutenant Colonel Chu's son, and I've borne the lesson in mind and never lost my temper." "So how is it you say that I've again been boxing?" "This thing on my face was caused when I was out shooting the other day on the Ta Wong Hills by a flap from the wing of the falcon." "When is that?" asked Pao Yu. "I started," explained Zhu Ying, on the 28th of the third moon and came back only the day before yesterday. It isn't to be wondered at then, observed Cao Yün, that when I went the other day, on the 3rd and 4th, to a banquet at friend Shen's house, I didn't see there, yet I meant to have inquired about you, but I don't know how it slipped from my memory. Did you go alone, or did your venerable father accompany you? Of course my father went, Su. Ying replied, so I had no help but to go. For is it likely, sooth, that I've gone mad from lack of anything to do, don't we? Goodly number as we are, derive enough pleasure from our wine bouts and plays that I should go in quest of such kind of fatiguing recreation. But in this instance, a great piece of good fortune turned up an evil fortune. Xueqin and his companions noticed that he had finished his tea. Come along, they one and all proposed, and join the banquet. You can then quietly recount to us all your experiences. At this suggestion, Feng Tu's Ying there and then rose to his feet. According to etiquette, he said, I should join you in drinking a few cups. But today, I have still a very urgent matter to see my father about on my return, so that I truly cannot accept your invitation. Zhu Shupan, Hao, you, and the other young fellows would on no account listen to his excuses. They pulled him vigorously about and would not let him go. This is indeed strange, laughed Feng Su. Yang, when have you and I had, during all these years, to have recourse to such proceedings? I really am unable to comply with your wishes. But if you do insist upon making me have a drink, well, then bring a large cup and I'll take 2 cups full and finish. After this rejoinder, the party could not but give in. Xueqin took hold of the kettle, while Cao Yün grasped the cup, and they poured 2 large cups full. Feng Su, Ying stood up and quaffed them with 1 draught. But do after all, urged Cao. You finish this thing about a piece of good fortune in the midst of misfortune before you go. To tell you this today, smiled Feng Su, Ying will be no great fun. But for this purpose, I intend standing a special entertainment and inviting you all to come and have a long chat. And in the second place, I've also got a favor to ask of you. Saying this, he pushed his way and was going off at once, when Xu Shipan interposed. What you've said, he observed, has put us more than ever on pins and needles. We cannot brook any delay. Who knows when you will ask us round, so better tell us and thus avoid keeping people in suspense. The latest, rejoined Feng Zu, Ying in 10 days, the earliest in 8. With this answer, he went out of the door, mounted his horse, and took his departure. The party resumed their seats at table. They had another bout, and then eventually dispersed. Yu returned into the garden in time to find Ji Jin thinking with solicitude that he had gone to see Chia Cheng and wondering whether it foreboded good or evil. As soon as she perceived Cao Yün come back in a drunken state, she felt urged to inquire the reason of it all. Peyo told her one by one the particulars of what happened. People, added Jen, wait for you with lacerated heart and anxious mind, and there you go and make merry. Yet you could very well, after all, have sent someone with a message. Didn't I purpose sending a message? Exclaimed Cao. You? Of course I did. But I failed to do so, as on the arrival of friend Feng, I got so mixed up that the intention vanished entirely from my mind. While excusing himself, he saw Cao try enter the apartment. Have you tasted any of our new things? She asked, a smile curling her lips. Laughed Cao. You must have certainly tasted what you've got in your house long before us. Cao Xueqin shook her head and smiled. Yesterday, she said, my brother did actually make it a point to ask me to have some. But I had none. I told him to have some. But I had none. I told him to keep them and send them to others. So confident am I that with my mean lot and scanty blessings, I little deserve to touch such dainties. As she spoke, a servant girl poured her a cup of tea and brought it to her. While she sipped it, she carried on a conversation on irrelevant matters, which we need not notice, but turn our attention to Lin Tai. The instant she heard that Chia Cheng had sent for Cao Yün and that he had not come back during the whole day, she felt very distressed on his account. After supper, the news of Cao Yün's return reached her, and she keenly longed to see him. Ask him what was up. Step by step she trudged along when espying Pao Chi going in the Pao Yu's garden. She herself followed close in her track. But on their arrival at the Hsang Fang Bridge, she caught sight of the various kinds of water, fowl bathing together in the pond, and although unable to discriminate the numerous species, her gaze became so transfixed by their respective variegated and bright plumage and by their exceptional beauty that she halted. And it was after she had spent some considerable time in admiring them that she repaired at last to the Ihung court. The gate was already closed. Tai Yu, however, lost no time in knocking. But Qing Wen and Pi Heng had, who would have thought it, been having a tiff and were in a captious mood. So upon unawares seeing Pao Xie step on the scene, Qing Wen at once visited her resentment upon Pao Chai. She was just standing in the court giving vent to her wrongs, shouting, "You're always running over and seating yourself here, whether you've got good reason for doing so or not. And there's no sleep for us at the third watch, the middle of the night though it be," when, all of a sudden, she heard someone else calling at the door. Qing Wen was the more moved to anger. Without even asking who it was, she rapidly bawled out, "They've all gone to sleep. You'd better come tomorrow." Lin Tai Yu was well aware of the natural peculiarities of the waiting maids and of their habit of playing practical jokes upon each other, so fearing that the girl in the inner room had failed to recognize her voice and had refused to open under the misconception that it was some other servant girl, she gave a second shout in a higher pitch. "It's I?" she cried. "Don't you yet open the gate?" Qing Yün, as it happened, did not still distinguish her voice, and in an irritable strain she rejoined, "It's no matter who you may be, mister. Secundus has given orders that no one at all should be allowed to come in." As these words reached Lin Tai Yu's ear, she unwittingly was overcome with indignation at being left standing outside. But when on the point of raising her voice to ask her one or two things, and to start a quarrel with her, albeit, she again argued mentally, "I can call this my aunt's house, and it should be just as if it were my own. It's, after all, a strange place. And now that my father and mother are both dead, and that I am left with no one to rely upon, I have for the present to depend upon her family for a home. Were I now therefore to give way to a regular fit of anger with her, I'll really get no good out of it." While indulging in reflection, tears trickled from her eyes. But just as she was feeling unable to retrace her steps, and unable to remain standing any longer, and quite at a loss what to do, she overheard the sound of jocular language inside, and listening carefully, she discovered that it was indeed Pao Yu and Pao Oj. Lin Tai Yu waxed more wroth. After much thought and cogitation, the incidents of the morning flashed unawares through her memory. It must, in fact, she mused, be because Pao Yu is angry with me for having explained to him the true reasons. But why did I ever go and tell you? You should, however, have made inquiries before you lost your temper to such an extent with me as to refuse to let me in today. But is it likely that we shall not by and by meet face to face again?" The more she gave way to thought, the more she felt wounded and agitated, and without heeding the moss laden with cold dew, the path covered with vegetation, and the chilly blasts of wind, she lingered all alone, under the shadow of the bushes at the corner of the wall, so thoroughly sad and dejected that she broke forth into sobs. Lin Tai Yu was, indeed, endowed with exceptional beauty, and with charms rarely met with in the world. As soon, therefore, as she suddenly melted into tears, and the birds and rooks roosting on the neighboring willow boughs and branches of shrubs caught the sound of her plaintive tones, they one and all fell into a most terrific flutter, and taking to their wings, they flew away to distant recesses. So little were they able to listen with equanimity to such accents. But the spirits of the flowers were, at the time, silent and devoid of feeling. The birds were plunged in dreams and in a state of stupor. So why did they start? A stanza appositely assigns the reason. Piano Air's mental talents and looks must in the world be rare. Alone, clasped in a subtle smell, she quits her maiden room. The sound of but one single sob scarcely dies away, and drooping flowers cover the ground and birds fly in dismay. Lin Tai Yu was sobbing in her solitude when a creaking noise struck her ear and the door of the court was flung open. who came out is not yet ascertained. But reader, should you wish to know, the next chapter will explain.